We are now about to move to another country. So we've had Heather, who's represented Cambodia in an international school. We are going to move across to Thailand, and we are going to find out a little bit more about what it's like to serve across there with Tabitha. Tabitha, are you on the call? Let's see. There we go. We've got a screen spotlight of you. So Tabitha, you've had a totally different background. So let's start with, where did you grow up, and tell us, where are you based now? And tell us a little bit about your family, if you can, before you start your talk.
Well, I can start my slide and then you can see a picture of my family.
Oh, excellent. Oh, that's exciting. But yeah, do tell us, where did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in Canada. So
and where are your parents actually originally from?
They're also from Canada, and my grandparents are from China.
Wow. What was it like growing up? Because obviously you would have been a TCK as well. Did you have lots of the fusions, Canadian and also?
Yeah, not as much. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I was a TCK. So I would say, like, having married a TCK, it's very different than just being an immigrant.
Yeah. Wow. Well, looking forward to finding a bit more about it. Let's do share, and you can tell us a bit about what you're currently up to and what you're serving as.
So this is my family. I'm Tabitha. I got married. I moved to Asia first, moved to Asia in 2010, and met my husband in Hong Kong. And we've been working with third culture kids since the beginning of 2014. So I am monocultural. I would call myself monocultural Canadian, but married a third culture kid who is now an adult, obviously. And very simply put, then my husband grew up in a different country than his parents' nationality. We are both certified math teachers, and now we have 2 TCKs of our own, age 8. So our journey on the field hasn't been straight though, but that is also very normal, unfortunately. So our family is now living in our 3rd city and in our 2nd country in the last 7 years. So when we first applied to serve families in Asia, we were going as teachers, and we were asked if we would be interested in teaching with a non-traditional education model. And we said, okay, yeah, sure, tell us about it. And so we learned about the modular study group, nicknamed MSG, very great name. And we taught with them for the first 3 years in our first city. Some things had shifted around and we ended up having to move. And so we moved to our 2nd city and also taught with MSG there. And when we got there, we were told that they didn't need both our husband and I to work with MSG as teachers. And so so they told us though that they really needed dorm parents. And I was like, okay, wasn't prepared for that. Yes, okay. And so we started our dual roles as teaching and boarding home parents. And then things shifted again. And after 2 years, we moved countries and are now in our current city, still serving with MSG. And due to visa complications, which come up, then I am now at an international school. My husband is still with MSG, and we are both education consultants, serving with families who live in Asia. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the question, like, is it worth it to you to travel 4 hours and then take 762 turns on this crazy winding path to get to school? Okay, and so for most people, they would say, no, I don't even like school. However, for our kids, for our TCKs, this is often the case. Not every TCK, but some of them definitely, this is the journey that they take to get to our center. So with the growing desire to reach unreached people groups, we often see young couples or young families move out into rural communities, and they're building up their relationships with people. And When the kids are young, they cling to the family and there's no problems. They play with the locals, they have fun. But as the kids reach their preteens, oftentimes there's this beginning longing for friendships. Those local friendships aren't quite what they were hoping for. The locals start seeing them as other. They themselves don't feel that same sense of belonging that they wish they had. And so you hear a lot with the people sharing with their TCK experience that, I feel like I didn't belong when I went back home to my passport country. And so in the preteen years, a lot of families end up asking and being in this stage of life, like, what do we do? Okay, so we helped our kids grow up in these smaller towns. We love it. Our ministry is taking off. What do we do? Do we want to send our child to boarding school? Do we want to repatriate and go home? Do we want to move to a major city for better social opportunities? Oftentimes the children are there in the rural cities and they might be the only foreign face there. And so these are conversations that we all often have as education consultants. So the MSG, the Modular Study Group, is a non-traditional model that has it allows the students to travel to the major city that's close by, or maybe not so close by, and they come in for an intensive 1 week of academic studies each month. And so what happens then is this allows parents to stay in their more rural locations, and the 3 weeks that the students are not in class, they then return back to their families. And so it's a win-win situation where the students are getting social interaction, they're getting their academics, but they're also staying with their family. So you can, I was talking to one dad about the MSG option, and he had no idea that it existed. And he was living in a closed country, and you could just see a weight that was lifted from his shoulders when I told him about the option, because it's quite heart-wrenching, heartbreaking to families to need to think about moving away from their ministry. It becomes such a huge thing to you, having lived in a city for maybe 15 years, growing those relationships, and then saying well, we actually have to move because of our kids' education. So the MSG, I thought, was a win-win situation. So circling back to the question, is it worth it then to travel for 4 hours, 762 turns to go to school? Unfortunately, this is not a one-time trip. The kids do this every month for 10 months of the year, and they're very willing to do so that they can have those social interactions. Okay, so beyond the academics, okay, so I am a teacher. I love the academics. I think kids should be educated, but beyond the academics, what has been the largest value of MSG for the TCKs? One is that they've been able to find their people. Okay, so we should never take having friends for granted. So TCKs grow up in a culture that's not their own, and it's been very hard to be accepted by locals. And so when they're preteens and teens, they often feel disconnected. And so providing a space for other TCKs to come together and have a group that they can say, I connect with you, I belong to you, is so huge, so huge. And so we have seen the friendships, they go so deep so fast, because they're whoa, we speak the same language. And I don't have to explain to you that I have moved 4 times, that I don't have to explain to you that where are you from? This is a hard question to answer. We speak the same language. And so I often joke with people that our job is to hold parties. Like, that's my job. Yeah, because what we, a large part of what we do is to create a safe space where the TCKs can be just themselves. And because when they're at home, oftentimes they are part of their parents' ministry. And so there's these expectations to behave a certain way or to be serving in a certain way. And so MSG allows them to come together and then just be kids, right? Like, they are kids. They should be allowed to be themselves. The second part of this is the faith building. And so while they're away from home at the dorms, they are allowed to question their faith and give honest answers. This might not be allowed, or this might be like really scary to do under the parents' care, just because they're expected to answer a certain way in front of certain people. And so being allowed to question and say things and say, like, I'm not sure if I believe certain things, or I don't know. Again, we're creating this safe space. And so I remember having a Bible study and talking about this swimming pool example. And like, are you in the swimming pool? Like, the swimming pool being the Christian faith, your relationship with Jesus. Are you in that swimming pool and are you swimming? Or are you in the swimming pool, but you're just standing there? Like, are you just dipping your toes in? Or are you like on the sidelines? And I think a lot of people assume, like, hey, I grew up in a family of faith, therefore, like, my child should be in that pool. But having this space and creating a space where they could answer and say, you know what, I don't know. I'm on the sidelines and I don't even know that I want to get in the pool. Giving them the space to voice that, and then, yeah, and talking about it as friends, as in the dorm, in a safe space, has been really huge for me. Yeah, so there's lots of conversations and lots of things that need to come up and be discussed as they consider re-entering their passport countries. And that's been one of my highlights for serving as a boarding home parent and as a teacher in MSG. The last thing here you see is being part of that +5 intentional adults. And so I'm sure some of you have heard like that Generation X is walking away from their faith. A lot of TCKs walk away from their faith. And it's scary and sad. But there has also been a study that says if you have +5, like 5 extra intentional adults in your life, speaking into your children's faith, into their lives, interested in them, that will help it with preventing them walking away from their faith. It's not a guarantee, right? But if I can be that person, it's such a privilege to help the kids along their journeys. Yeah, so. Okay, so oftentimes teachers, there's this joke that teachers work long hours and then they're not well compensated. And so you ask a teacher, like, what do you make? And the teacher will say, like, I make a difference. Okay, and so here, people want to go into the teaching profession often to make a difference. And I would argue that like this job is the real deal. Like, you are making a difference in individual students' lives, and like a higher percentage than I've ever seen at any job. You get to know the students individually, and I love the depth of relationship that you get there. Yeah, so keeps me on the field. Love it. Very fun. And also wanted to say that, you know, doing kingdom work, there's a huge network of people that are working together, right? There are people that need to soften the soil, people need to plant the seeds, people who will harvest, and then people who will continue to help the church growth. And then you have this huge administration team behind them that people might not necessarily think about or know. And so TCK education, TCK care, we are behind everybody and supporting them. And to me, this TCK work is definitely not secondary. So if you are preparing to go to the field, what are some things that you might want to prepare for? One is deepen your relationship with God. You will be tested in so many ways. Yeah, and it's good for you. It's good for your relationship with God. It's also good for like all the people you're serving with. And yeah, just helping people walk along. You're walking alongside people. Be open to multiculturalism. Sounds obvious, right? But yeah, like I think that we often have monocultural things that we want to grip onto, but learn a local language, learn culture before you come. Think like read books and know about different cultures and how people think. And I think the thing that had popped up in my mind as we're talking about Asia is like, what does a shame-based culture look like? Like, and how would people act? And, you know, I can't go out on the street and confront people. Learn about TCK struggles. There are many, and it's such a beautiful people group, and they have so many strengths, but they also have lots of struggles. So know what those struggles are so that we can help be preventative. Be flexible. And we say this because like I've moved so many times, more times than I want. I'm done moving, hopefully. And it just happens and it's okay. Every time we know that God has been with us every single step of the way. And we are where we want to be, he wants us to be. Practice being mentored and be a mentor. Okay, so all of these first 5 points, these are for like everybody. And then if you are thinking of coming as a teacher, then I would suggest getting as much classroom experience as possible, getting certified. These things are really helpful, knowing grade level standards, and then becoming a specialist. It's becoming a bigger and bigger thing, which is amazing that people are coming onto the field with children with diverse needs. I think before that would have been like something really, really scary to do. And people are braver now and they are doing it. They're taking the jump. And so there are needs for like occupational therapists, for speech therapists, for people who work with kids with autism, for children's psychologists. So if you know a specialist, if you are a specialist, yes, come, please. Right. That's all I have.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That's just so helpful to just learn a bit more about yourself, but also at the same time to just gain that sort of gain that understanding of what it's like to actually serve there, and also just those really cool tips about how to prepare. Thank you so much. It's really quite helpful to see that. And I really love your first point, which is deepen your relationship with God. I mean, we find that we're trained professionally in what we do, but most of the time you find that on the off chance, you're pretty much there, you know, living that Christian example and, you know, being able to know more about God and being able to help those young people answer those questions as they're on their journey of becoming a Christian themselves and, you know, making that commitment to faith. It's just really important and helpful to be in touch and be walking that close relationship with God, because you could take the children and the young people as far as only you've walked. So thank you for your time and for sharing. We are now going to move across to Darren and Shauna. this lovely couple that I've had the privilege of meeting probably last year or maybe the year before. It feels like so long ago, but I'm sure it's not that long. They have a really interesting journey of how they got there on the field. And I'd like to ask them that before they go on. Do introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about your journey before heading to where you're currently at.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Darren.
Hi, I'm Shauna.
Our journey, I assume you're assuming how long it took us to get to the field. I'm not sure, Tabitha, but we began wrestling with the question, should we go to the field? And it took us 7 years before when we started really looking into it, and then when we arrived on the field. So a lot of people were waiting for us when we finally showed up. It felt like.
It felt like there were so many twists and turns along the way of when we actually arrived here. You're kind of thinking, okay, now all the hard work's done. We're here. So it should be smooth sailing, which is, really funny if you've ever gone and lived in a different culture. But we've been learning a ton this past 10 months. Will be a year in April. And lots of bumps along the road, but I know that God is teaching us a lot. So,
yeah. So tell us where you've come from, where you're calling from, and just a little bit about your family.
Sure. So we came from Western Canada, Alberta, Canada, and we are in Chiang Mai, Thailand.
Mm-hmm. We have 5 kids. So when we came to the field, our oldest was 12 and our youngest was 5. Mm-hmm. So now, they're almost a year older, but it's been an interesting journey. We kind of thought, okay, we knew God was leading us to use our gifts to serve missionaries in a practical way. We had been on some short-term mission teams being in youth ministry in Canada, and just really seeing the need for practical assistance to missionaries. We would go on these short-term trips, and missionaries were going out of their way to serve us. And we're just like, okay, Lord, how can we be a practical support? And so we looked at the giftings and the personality that we had and what was important to us. And it really seemed to fit quite well with this role of dorm parenting. And so specifically, we're dorm parenting for the MSG group, who are part of this modular study group. And so, Tabitha explained that marvelously. So we're able to engage in youth ministry in a different way, in a new culture, new country. The thing we didn't really prepare ourselves for was, we're going to have 5 TCKs in our family now. So that has been quite a journey. We've been learning a lot about TCKs this year.
Lovely. Well, I'll leave you to it, and just Darren and Shauna are going to share it with us, their experience being dorm parents, which is the other side of this cool experience of supporting TCKs on the fields. Right, off you go.
Being a dorm parent, I don't feel was very surprised. We're not full-time dorm parents. That's the other part of it. So as Tabitha was mentioning, 1 week out of the month, basically, it's like our go week. We have the students here. We are, it's kind of burning the candle at both ends. We're up early and we're getting them ready out the door, and they go to their classes, and then they come back at the end of the day around supper time, dinner time, and they're ready to be together 100%. And then we're trying to get them to bed on time. No, they're actually really good kids.
They're amazing. That's been one of the most pleasant discoveries, is just, these are some really awesome people, and they're so excited to be here and be together. And so it's pretty cool to get to know them.
Yeah, and they're an extremely welcoming bunch, which is really eye-opening. And just like Tabitha was saying, when they're together, they accept one another, and they see us there on the sidelines, and they bring us right in, kind of thing. We did full-time ministry in Canada for 20 years roughly, in youth ministry, and so that was our background and where we were comfortable. Our family was growing. When we first started wrestling with this question of God, do you want us to go overseas? We only had 3 kids at the time. And then we ended up having 2 more during those 7 years of waiting and discerning. Shauna is also has a degree in social work. And so, I mean, we feel like we were already going one way with our life. For myself, I knew God was calling me into youth ministry at a young age. And I felt like on fire and going where God was calling us to go. And then we got this turn almost 90 degrees and felt like God's calling us in another direction, which for me, when we started taking teams overseas to visit missionaries, I realized my eyes were open to the fact that the body of Christ is actually a global thing. It's not just a local microorganism or whatever. It's not a local small thing, but rather it's a global thing when we are a part of the body of Christ. I was going to ask you, Shauna, like, what would be like 1 or 2 of the road bumps that we've had in the last year? Like, just like,
well, for one, we sold our house in Canada when we reached full support. And then a week later, the Thailand visa office shut. So we were homeless, living in a camper, living in various Airbnbs and free houses that sweet people gave to us. So there's been that, yeah, that was significant.
That's a great one. And you might have this plan of what you're going into. I want to just remind us a couple of things. Like in Matthew 28, Jesus gives us the Great Commission, right? And he's saying to his disciples, like, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And then Jesus tags on this promise at the end. And it says, and surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. It's this beautiful promise that Christ gives us, that when we go, he is with us. We downsized our life to this sort of gypsy life in Canada where we were mobile. We had to downsize all our possessions. And then when it was time to actually move overseas, we had to downsize it to small suitcases. And we got it down to 14 suitcases and a couple of musical instruments. And we are ready to get on the plane, and we hit another speed bump. We come out and 1/3 of our luggage was stolen. It was gone. So we had downsized, and then we got downsized again against our will. And then we're headed out. We couldn't do anything about it because the plane tickets are bought. Everything's time sensitive because of the pandemic, and we had to go. And it was just in that going even of seeing God going before us and with us that we were experiencing it. I mean, people praying for us, people supporting us along the way, and then even just how God provided for us after we got here. When we were wrestling with this go, even in our pre-life, before we were becoming missionaries, before we were coming to support TCKs, we'd make a list of like, is this a pro? Is this a con? Should we go? Do we stay? And when we had these lists and we're trying to balance things out, that promise for me of Jesus saying, when you go, I'm going to be with you. I couldn't make a negative list big enough to outweigh that promise that he would be with me. And that helped me, that enabled me at times. And then the other thing also that I was willing to put up for God is like, okay, God, if you are willing to open a door for us, surely you can shut the door if you don't want us to come. So if you're wrestling with this, am I going, am I not coming, or whatever, where does God want me to go? Man, just press into Jesus, press into him, follow him, and he will guide your steps. And truly, I don't believe you need to go overseas to serve Jesus, to experience him. It's where you are now. And it's kind of like something that's been highlighted already. You can't take people to where you haven't been. And so if you're not serving and loving where you are, it's going to be difficult to do it when you go overseas. A strong value that I have in the way that I want to live my life, especially as a father and as a pastor, was when people were wrestling with the question, does God exist? Is Jesus real? I wanted to be able to say, why don't you just come hang out with us? Come be with my family. Come spend time with me. And hopefully the way I live my life you see Jesus showing up in the everyday, in the small details. And when I think of that as, can that be something I can use on the mission field with TCKs? For sure. And we're living life with them when they're here. They see me trying to meet their needs, and then have my child walk up and interrupt what's going on. You know, like different things like that can just easily cause stress in our ups and downs. They see that. And man, do I pray. I pray that Jesus is what spills out in those moments, because it's easy for me to get in the way of what's going on. You might have a plan of what you want to do, and how you're going to serve God, and what you can do. You might have this desire or this dream that God's given you. There's this guy in the Bible, Joseph. He's well known. He was given dreams at the age of 17, and he shared those dreams with his family, and his family was like, dude, you're messed up. But God brought those dreams to completion, and those dreams happened. And it didn't happen the way that Joseph probably could even imagine. There's ups and downs, and there's heartaches. So I would just encourage you, whatever dream you feel like God's been giving you, whatever dream God has like planted in you, realize you don't know the plan. He knows the plan. But again, back with our theme verse, like about how we are children of God. I mean, if he's the good Father, we can trust him, and we're going to experience what he has for us in this process.
I'd just like to jump in on that point and say too, coming into a new culture, you know, a lot of the time you feel very weak. As has been mentioned before, you know, you feel out of place and like you're learning so much, and it's quite an experience. But it's also really cool how God knows us. He knows us completely. He knows our strengths and our weaknesses. You know, before a word is on our lips, he knows it completely. So God can use our weaknesses just as much as he uses our strengths in serving here. And if we're willing to just give all of who we are to him and be honest and open and authentic, I think the relationships that can develop as a result of that are just really, great friendships and great even mentoring experiences can be really amazing.
Yeah. And in my last point, I just want to tie it into our identity. Like, not only does God make a plan for our salvation, and he's made a plan to rescue us, but the God who makes everything and sustains everything, holds it all together, he's welcomed us into that plan, so that he can not only work through us, but in us. Our process of being on the field, it's only been 10 months, and it feels like God has been working more on us than anything we're able to do, which is humbling. It's awkward because you feel like I need to be doing more because I'm here. But God is doing things in his time. And when I think of that, I'm reminded of the passage in Ephesians chapter 2. And there's in this passage at the beginning, like I would encourage you to read it later, the first 10 verses of chapter 2, but it talks about how God has taken us from something and he's doing something in us. And at the end of that, in verse 10, it just simply says, or I'll even back up to verse 8, God saved you by his grace when you believed. And you can't take credit for this. It's a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. But we are God's masterpiece. He has created anew in Christ Jesus so that we can do good things he planned for us long ago. That's mind-boggling that we are a masterpiece of God. The God who made everything, he delights in you, in each of us. Like, how can he do that? But that is how great he is. That is how big he is. So I want to encourage you to go. Keep your plans and your dreams that you have before God in an open hand. I think we saw the word flexible even. Don't be afraid to tell God or others what those plans are. We're part of a community that's bigger than ourselves, and God uses his body to accomplish the things that he wants to do. And trust that God is going to not just use you, but he's going to change you, because you are his. Thank you.
That was really brilliant. Thank you so much. I love the way that it's like, you know, husband and wife just sort of sharing these gems. If you'd have a look and get a chance in our different chat rooms, there's lots of different families and parents here as well trying to find that advice. So it's really quite nice that you're able to share those truths, especially going out with a family of 5. That they must be having a ball along with finding out and discovering themselves just like you are. I mean, it's like the journey the journey the young people go on is just as much as the adults, but helping them to process those those feelings and just what's happening. It must be so mind-boggling, but like you say, leave it with God, and if you keep pressing on him, he's definitely the answer to everything. There's some lovely comments. You know, Tim saying hugely helpful, Evie saying thank you so much, such a blessing and encouragement, and I'm sure many of us are finding that too. Yeah, thank you so much. That was just so helpful to find out how to prepare ourselves as parents, as other people going out to serve these young people, because it's just such a real joy. I know joy is a funny word here in the UK, but it is a real joy to be serving, and especially with being pastors for over 20 years, honestly, taking the challenge and the leap of faith and going to Asia is a whole different ball game, but I'm sure you're definitely the right place and the right people to do that. We are now going to have a checkup to see if there's any questions. It should be, I think, a time for Q&A. Now, we did say that if you have any questions, do pop it in Slido, and we're going to get all of our speakers back. If someone could just highlight, there's still some time for us to ask some questions. We've got bits and pieces here and there. Okay, there we go. Heather, there's a question for you. What sort of ministries do the parents do whose kids you teach?
So there'd be quite a variety of roles. So there's some of the roles which would be with being capital city, like how Tabitha described too. There's a lot of support roles there. So things like director of the mission for that country, lots of different roles, you know, TCK advisor, doctor for the missionary, so many things, but as well a lot of roles which would work with the people. So things like being a doctor. There's also a lot of people who would have businesses. So as in, what I mean, there's trafficking there often, so there's a lot of missionaries who are you know, creating work for people so that they will not have to go back into trafficking. So there's a lot of support work there as well for the locals, as well as Bible college teachers, as well as different types of support roles in the country too. So there's just such a variety, and I guess that is where it's really important that there are also teachers there for them to stay, so that those ministries can keep happening, so that locals who maybe haven't had the chance, because I don't know what past you know about Cambodia, but there was a genocide in the 70s which made a big gap with intellectuals. So there are a lot of missionaries out there trying to support people and educate people and help them with getting to, I guess, the same opportunities as the surrounding countries. So there's so many different missionaries there which have different roles. It's a lot of variety. Like, I know somebody, and it's quite a cool role, he fixes motorbikes, and what he does is he gets guys who are local alongside him, and he trains them how to do it in an honest way, so that it's done well. And there's just such variety. So business, using skills, using things to help people with learning how to be a tailor, just so many different roles there. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's such a big ministry. You don't know who you're serving, but there's so many different walks of life, and you do have the privilege of maybe being able to introduce Christ to those from families who don't even know. We've got a very interesting question. I'd probably like to field this more to Tabitha and probably Darren. The question is, what do you do when it looks like a TCK is walking away from the Lord? So, you open this safe space with all of these young people from really great Christian backgrounds and children who know God. But what happens when you start noticing this happening in the spaces that you get to see them? How do you help them? What can you do? What's your advice?
Well, I feel like I should put my pastor hat on more, because that's more what I would understand this question. But I mean, first, I think I would just try to encourage the family that this isn't a bad question. This isn't something too big for God. That this is actually probably a good thing for their faith to go through those things where they're wrestling. I mean, as a parent, that's one thing I'm wrestling with, is how do I can't just hand my faith off to my kids, but rather how do they get their own faith? Yeah. Go ahead.
I think, part of walking the long road with somebody is being able to be there for the highs and those mountaintops experiences, but also the times of questioning and struggle. And I think just showing up for somebody, knowing that, having them know that they can reach out to you when they're having a struggle, that they can be real, ask hard questions, and that they're still going to be accepted no matter what they say. I think it's pretty cool if a person who is struggling, a young person, reaches out to a believer in that struggle. That's a pretty amazing opportunity. And I think that just shows even how God has provided for them a Christian in their realm to pray for them, to encourage them, to give them truth, but also just to be there, right? To, just walk alongside and don't give up on them. And just consider it a privilege to be able to be in that position.
Have you seen this happen, Tabitha, in the many years that you've sort of worked with MSG? Tell us about, what you would sort of give advice to in this situation.
Yeah, I think setting up TCK groups as much as you can beforehand. So MSG kind of sets a good kind of group setting where they all become really close, and then they are lifelong friends, hopefully. So we have alumni that come together and still keep in touch with one another. And then like from Hong Kong, like the people who were sent out from Hong Kong, they also get together and they know each other and they love on each other. And so I've known a couple TCKs who have come out as LGBT. And I think in those situations, the families didn't seem like safe places where they could talk to their parents openly, which is hard. Every family dynamic is different. So I'm not like saying like it's the family's fault, definitely not. But with having that like +5 adults in your life, like being another adult, being a place where TCKs can ask hard questions, can talk about issues that, like that maybe they couldn't with their parents or they didn't feel like bringing up. Trying to create these different safe spaces. Hard question, very hard question.
Definitely. And I'm sure we've all been through that at some stage. And so, it's always just definitely pointing back to that relationship with God and having those good influences, Christian influences in your life. Let's see, how are we doing for time, Nat? Thumbs up, thumbs down, shall we? Yeah, we've got a little bit, we've got 2 minutes left. Wow, so many different questions. Let me just have a quick look. Let's see. We got another one for Darren and Shauna. Let's see. Blankens, how do you educate your younger children that are under 12? You've obviously got lots of younger children. Tabitha, feel free to add as well at the end. You do have many children and you've brought them up. How would you? Yes. Yeah, there's another vote for that. Tell us about how you would be able to look after your children as well as do your ministry.
Yeah. So we have been homeschoolers for a long time, which is part of what drew us to the MSG program, because on the weeks that these students are away, they still have access and support to their teachers, but they are also schooling at home. Our original plan was that our our older son would join MSG when we came to Thailand, but because of visa issues, he is actually at an international school this year. We have the hopes that our 2 older kids will join MSG next year if we can work that out with our visas. Our 3 younger children, actually 4 younger children, are homeschooling. And so how we work that out is like a dorm week is a different kind of week. It definitely is probably not our most stellar homeschool week. And probably the week after too, because we're really tired. But in the city that we're in, there is a lot of homeschool support. There's a lot of other homeschoolers involved with various missions organizations. Yeah, so we joined a homeschooling co-op that's been a support to us. And we actually have a homeschool helper and / dorm assistant who's living with us right now. So I found that really helpful as a support to the support system, because she's just able to help keep things rolling sometimes when, a different thing comes up that we have to deal with work related, that one of us can still be homeschooling and she can still be working with a couple of kids too, and just keep things progressing. So that's what we do. One thing we've also found with homeschoolers are very resilient. And if you can learn to love to learn, then they do a lot of just interest-based learning as well. And so it's all working out okay so far. We'll see.
Great, thank you. Tabitha, is there anything you want to add to that at all? Or?
Yeah, I think a lot of families come onto the field and then they're not expecting to homeschool, or they're like, I don't want to homeschool. It's not as scary as you think. I think it seems really scary and seems really daunting, but it is such a blessing. You get to know your kids in a completely different way, and you get to spend a lot of time with them, and you get to go at your own pace. You get to reteach them anything that they don't learn. It's amazing. So I would recommend homeschooling.
Lovely. Now, Heather, you went out as a single. You obviously would have just been borrowed and adopted as an auntie. What's it like working with all these other families with young children?
Well, I guess that was the first time I was adopted as an auntie type thing, so it was eye-opening. But I think going as a single, it's very different to being as a single in the UK. So you really do feel part of many families. So you have a real closeness. So for example, I was with OMF, and I would see some of the kids that were my, OMF family at school. And there was that sort of deeper connection with the kids too, actually. But also you felt like you were, brothers and sisters to their parents. If you needed anything as well, that's a very daunting thing too. What happens if my shower breaks? What happens if I have a problem with my motorbike? Just anything like that. But there I definitely felt like I had 101 people I could turn to so easily. And it also meant that those harder questions with processing, obviously I'm back now, what will that look like, or how long will I stay? I actually extended my time when I was there. So having that kind of community, although you go as a single, you really don't feel it that much, because you have so many families to be part of, and you get to enjoy things like Ticket to Ride at the same time as just enjoying other things too. And you do, I feel like I know some of the kids a lot more than I would in a different setting. So yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.